62% of the Australian population is obese or overweight, particularly with the middle-aged people in the baby boomer age bracket. And there's a lot of gimmicks and diets out there. And with me today is Heyden Keys, our resident expert naturopath. Welcome, Heyden.
Thank you, Domaine. Lovely to be here.
Thank you. And so, Heyden, we all know that if we eat too much, we'll put on weight. Is there any other reason?
Yes, there is. Besides the amount of calories you're eating, there's a certain hormone that your body releases, which basically signals your body to store fat, and that's called insulin. And I find that's the main reason people are putting on weight these days, not just the amount of food they're eating.
Okay, so what does that insulin do?
Okay, most people have heard of insulin because of diabetes, but insulin's a hormone that we naturally produce, and what it does is it moves sugar from the bloodstream and puts it in the cell.
And when it goes into the cells or from the bloodstream, what effect is that having on us?
Okay. Depending on how much sugar is coming into the cell will use what it can for energy, but any extra gets converted into body fat, which makes insulin a fat-making and fat-storing hormone.
So how can we stop it from storing fat?
Okay. Now, insulin is only released by your body when we eat carbohydrates. So that's things like potato, bread, rice, pasta, these sorts of things, because they eventually break down into sugar. Okay. And so then that causes our body to release the insulin to start moving the sugar into the cell. So if we want to get insulin down in our body, what we want to do is we want to get away from eating foods that break down into too much sugar.
What would those foods be? Okay,
so they're the foods that I was just mentioning before, so our bread, our rice, our pasta, and particularly breakfast cereals. I have a great saying, breakfast cereals are evil because they're highly processed and they break down into heaps of starch. And a lot of them contain sugar these days that people aren't aware of.
So if we can't eat breakfast cereals, what do we eat?
Okay, we can go back to just doing things in the old days. We could maybe have some bacon and eggs with some mushrooms and tomatoes, for instance, or just something simple like some yogurt, some nuts, some fruit, or some cottage cheese, or any cheese and a little bit of fruit with that in the morning.
So that's fairly easy to eat in a rush?
It is, it is. Everyone tells me that they don't have any problem eating that sort of food and preparing it. It could be prepared the night before or quickly in the morning. You're not going to be there in the kitchen for 10-20 minutes in the morning doing that. Very quick to prepare, substantial, and keeps you going for all the morning.
Okay, great. So there's a lot of yo-yo diets out there and gimmicks out there. How do we discern the difference? How do we know what's good and not?
Okay, everyone's been conditioned to think low fat because that's what we've been told for the last 30 or 40 years. But what I'm finding is that because of the insulin levels, we need to take a different approach, and that's a low carbohydrate approach. Now that doesn't necessarily mean high protein, but just an adequate amount of protein and fat in your diet, but really being conscious of how much carbohydrate you're eating, because that carbohydrate is the sugars found in plants. It breaks down and goes into your bloodstream, pushes the insulin levels up, and turns on your fat-making switch.
So is that related to there's a lot around there about the low GI, is that related?
So the thing I find people are getting confused about is the GI. Now the GI just tells us how quickly a food breaks down into sugar. It doesn't actually tell us how much sugar's in the food. So I find a lot of people have stopped eating things like watermelon and they've gone on to sweet potato, basmati rice, low GI cereals, grainy, seedy bread, these sorts of things, thinking that that's going to help them control their blood sugars and help them lose weight. But in actual fact, all that food actually breaks down into a whole heap of sugar that then drives up their insulin levels and basically turns on their fat-making switch in their body.
So that's that yo-yo effect that we've...
Yes, exactly. So what happens is the blood sugars go up, the insulin goes into the bloodstream, the sugar then gets moved into the cell, but then it drops too low. But because the insulin is still there, it's still telling the body to store fat. So the person, they can't get any stored energy, so what they have to do to bring their blood sugars back up is eat again. So these carbohydrates tend to make you want to eat more carbohydrates. And we basically keep ourselves locked in this fat-making, fat-storing mode, and the weight just creeps up and up and up over time.
So it's almost like a craving.
It is, it is. It just drives cravings. So when you actually cut down your carbohydrates, and you don't even worry about the GI so much, you just worry about more fresh food, what happens is that you bring down your insulin levels, you then allow your body to be able to tap into those reserves and start to pull any extra energy it needs from your reserves. This keeps your blood sugars nice and stable, it stops cravings, it stops hunger, your energy levels actually come up, and you actually burn body fat very quickly.
Okay, so what about water? what does that play in weight loss?
Yes, water is really, really important. One, we want to drink water because it's just going to flush our system. And as we burn body fat, we release stored up chemicals and toxins, and they come into our system and we need to flush them out. But interestingly, back in our very primitive days, thirst and hunger were very similar sensations because we got most of our water and fluid through the food we eat. So actually, often when people think they're hungry, they may actually be thirsty. So one of the best tips in weight loss is, if you're feeling hungry, go have a glass of water, because you might have actually been thirsty, not hungry.
That's an interesting fact. I wonder how many people think about that.
Well, it's been around for a long time, that one, that if you're feeling hungry, go have some water, but not many people do it.
Really useful information, Heyden. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Delmay.
And if you're looking for more information, go to healthyremedies.com.au.